How's it going? Uh-oh, I'm frozen.
Yeah, all right. How are you? You are
I'm
frozen.
doing, all right. Are we synchronized? Are we in the same universe again?
Mm, really?
I'm Matthew Buckley Smith, and you're listening to SLEERICKETS. Thank you all for listening. I'm out here in the car. I'm out here with Echo in the car at my in-laws' place, recording a quick intro for y'all. I have a couple of announcements. First, I did just finish recording a really great, very crunchy Emily Dickinson episode with Cameron that I'm hoping to get out in the next week or so. Around that same time, January 1st, the evening of January 1st at 8 o'clock, I'm going to be on the Rattlecast, that's Rattle Magazine's live broadcast on YouTube that I think it is then recorded so you can watch it later if you'd like. But there's a chat, and there are, for subscribers, there's a whole writing exercise afterward and all this. But I'm going to be on there reading poems and talking about poetry, and I feel slightly out of my element because Rattle, it's just a different vibe, I guess, than SLEERICKETS. So if you are interested, I'd love to have you watch. If with luck, you'll be recovering from your hangovers by the evening of January 1st. But I'll be on there. I will put a link in the show notes to their YouTube channel. Come check it out. I will be I don't really read my own poems on this podcast, but I will be reading some poems from the forthcoming book as well as some new stuff. We'll see. I don't know. I'm not really sure. And I will almost certainly read a poem about Cameron that I published in Rattle. So I asked him, he said, just be sure to talk about me a lot. So there's that. And also, for any of you who didn't hear the note last time, I would love to hear from you about poetry classes. That is, thoughts you have about... It's come up on the podcast a number of times, but if you have thoughts about what might make for a good poetry class, or what has made for a good poetry class, or what kind of poetry class you would like to take, send me a note. I've gotten some good responses from listeners so far, and I would love to hear from more of you. More on that topic soon. Finally, thanks to all of the Secret Show listeners. It has been a very lively time on the Secret Show lately, both on the feed and on the Substack chat. So if you are curious, or if you need an extra... This is kind of a poetry light episode, so if you need a little extra dose of poetry, there's plenty of that on the Secret Show. Go to SLEERICKETS.substack.com and see what it's all about. If you put in your email address, I'll get you a week's access for free. All right. This week's episode is all about love of a particular variety. Alice was a very good sport and joined me in discussing the work of Harry Harlow, probably the most notorious behavioral psychologist after B.F. Skinner, and almost certainly even more hated than Skinner. If you are a fan of love, but he was very sincerely interested in love. And so that is the main focus of our conversation today. If you are a fan of love, or science, or psychology, or even history, then I think you will really enjoy this episode. If, however, you are a fan of rhesus macaque monkeys, might be a tough one for you. In any case, I hope you will enjoy my conversation with Alice. Here we are discussing the nature of love. I got into some weird rabbit holes this afternoon.
Oh, yeah. This guy takes you down some weird paths.
Yeah.
I was listening to an Ezra Klein interview about trauma this morning. I was like, maybe that'll be useful. I'm imagining this episode will be just wall-to-wall hilarity.
I mean, he is among the most despised behavioral psychologists. I don't know if there's a more famous despised animal scientist animal researcher than Harry Harlow.
And yet he is apparently responsible for a whole bunch of theories and ways of thinking that we still draw on today, and that your local therapist will be using on you later this week.
Yeah, I mean that your parents may well have used on you growing up.
Yep.
I think like what I found. All right, so we should provide some context for this animal psychology podcast that we are hosting, as always.
Both experts in the field, of course.
Right. We're talking about this paper called "The Nature of Love" by Harry Harlow. It was initially presented in 1958. That's why some of the just like some of the sections end with like real weird, occasionally off-color jokes, and those would have
Took me a
been
while.
hilariously accompanied by slides and a 1950s sense of humor. He was notorious for inserting inappropriate language and humor into scientific communications. But he delivered this as a paper for the American Psychological Association. He was the president either that year or the following year for a while, and he also published a number of research papers. This is published in Psychology Today as well, and he published a number of research papers on this and related experiments. But this is kind of an overview of what is certainly his best known series of experiments on rhesus macaques. So basically, his entire research career as a mature independent scientist was on rhesus macaques. They're small monkeys that reproduce and mature relatively quickly and were legal to import into the US, not always easy to import. And he was actually, I believe, the first one to start breeding them in the US.
Yeah, I was reading yesterday that he started his own breeding colony just because it cost too much money. Mm-hmm. And then there was an outbreak of tuberculosis in his lab. So he thought, I need to stop these monkeys from dying. I'm going to separate them from one another. Mm-hmm. And up to that point, he'd been doing experiments on intelligence. But then he realized after he separated them really early after birth that they started acting really weird. Yes. And then he thought, I could probably find something out here about what we would now call maternal attachment.
Yes.
And he started doing some truly horrendous things.
So what I found very illuminating after initially reading this paper and then going back and reading a book about his life and research is that the received wisdom at the time.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Don't touch your baby, kiss your baby once on the head as you put him to sleep.
Right.
Don't coddle him because he'll become an anxious weakling.
Right. There was a convergence of wisdom between 1940s and 50s psychologists and psychiatrists along with general physicians. And the agreement was, physical contact spreads disease, as well as, excessive nurturing, pampering produces, as you said, weak, dependent children. And so the best thing you can do is keep your child isolated and touch him as little as possible.
And of course, now we've swung completely the opposite direction where you have, what's it called? Contact?
Yeah. The theory that you're supposed to literally never not be touching your baby for the first 6 months of life or something insane like that, which is totally bizarre. I mean, it's totally bonkers.
Very difficult to achieve.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that's the received wisdom now. I think that is the extreme version of some of the wisdom. What is remarkable is that there's an awareness of touch from very early on, such that with Joanna, the girls were, Josie was premature, and so they had to do some stuff with her first, but Ellie, was literally flopped up onto her bare chest while still attached.
They tried to do that straight away.
Right. Yeah. So there's and you I remember even going to visit my little brother when he was born, and there was a lot more, he was sort of in the crib space holder thing more, and they would take him out and hold it, keep him in another room for a while. And the babies today are really kept by the mother and with the mother almost constantly, which can, it can also then make the mother go completely fucking insane sometimes. But despite his penchant for misogynistic jokes, Harlow does acknowledge at the end that like there's nothing about what he discovered that is special to women. That there's no reason men can't be nurturers in exactly the same way.
Although he puts that in some pretty strange terms right at the end there.
He does. I will we'll come back because I want to at some point offer a something of a defense of Harlow because he does do things that almost everybody, certainly anybody I have described them to during my ongoing obsession with him, anyone I've described his experiments to has found them immediately repugnant and cruel, and only worse the more you learn.
Let me try to outline them because I learned about these experiments when I was in high school. We watched videos of these experiments. So the basic idea is to try to disprove that maternal attachment is related to feeding. So he separates the rhesus monkeys from their actual mothers really early on, and he puts them in a cage with two types of mothers, a wire mother, which is a wire shape of a monkey with a head and a little nipple, which is attached to some milk so it can feed from the wire mother, and then the cloth mother, which is next to it, same shape, but it's wrapped in some terry toweling. And what the experiment showed was against what they expected. You would expect, according to the theory at the time, that the monkeys would just go for the milk, and that's the thing that matters. But actually, they spend all their time, as much as possible, on the cloth mother. Yep. And once he'd proved that, he did all kinds of really difficult to accept things where he would take them away from the mother. He would, he created these, the bit that really got me was he created these 4 types of cloth mothers that were evil mothers.
Monster mothers. Where
monster mothers, one of them would reject the baby with like a catapult at random intervals. Another would blow like cold air on it at random intervals. One of them had spikes that came out, and one of them would start rocking so ferociously that it threw the monkey off. And the heartbreaking bit is that even when they experience these things, once the mother becomes no longer dangerous, the little baby macaques go back to the monster mother.
That's the mother is the source of and consolation for suffering. Yes. Yeah. There are a number of, that's the basic experiment. There were many, many variations of these, as one would expect of a scientist, where they were both had nipples, only the wire. I mean, the shocking one was that even when only the wire mother had the milk, they would still prefer the cloth mother.
They would just go and get as much milk as they needed and then just go straight back
and spend almost all of their time with the cloth mother. And then he, beyond the just measuring the baby monkey's responses to the mother itself, he did find, and this is where some of what is called attachment theory, which was being developed by, there was like a small group of psychologists from across the US and then into the UK who were corresponding with him, that they were sort of the minority position at the time. And the people developing attachment theory were kind of correspondent friends of his. The part of the experiment that most bears that theory out, which is that your ability to function is largely defined by the degree of and type of attachment you form to your mother or parent figure early on. And there's a strong attachment, there's insecure attachment, there's negative attachment, and these all have consequences, not just for how you interact with the mother herself, but also with the rest of the world, even when she's not around. And so with the cloth mother, what they found is that the baby monkeys would still be scared of new stimuli, but they were, once they had kind of become accustomed to the stimuli with the mother in the room, they would then go out and play and explore, as long as they could always come back and reassure themselves with the cloth mother. So they actually seem to be, just having her in their lives seemed to make them more adventurous and more inquisitive. And the wire mother babies just remained frightened and reclusive.
Yeah,
and
just
never,
curled up in
yeah,
a ball.
yeah, yeah.
And I've heard of people doing that, a version of that experiment with actual mothers, human mothers and children,
Yeah.
just to measure
Mhm.
the child's attachment, and sort of go into a room with a bunch of toys, and then the mother leaves, and then you watch whether your child can handle that or
Yes.
whether they melt down. Yeah.
And they do, and similar results bear out. The can I tell you the version of this experiment that I read about that like for some reason got to me even more than the mother disappearing experiments.
Please.
They would do this thing where they would put a baby on a platform, an elevated platform with a plexiglass square in the middle, and the baby would, and so that to the baby it looked like there was a big hole because you could just see the floor 10 feet below. So they would crawl along the platform and then get to this, what looked like an edge, a drop off. And very consistently, what they would do is they would turn back and look to the mother. And
Right.
the mother would either make a worried face and they would stay away from the edge, or the mother would smile and nod and they would crawl across the plexiglass. They then had a control group. And this is the part that just like, oh, this kills me. They had a control group of mothers who were instructed to produce an expressionless, unresponsive face. And the babies would keep like making sounds and looking back and waving and trying to get the mother to respond. And the mothers would just stare with like wooden stares of, total lack of response to the baby. And it was apparently like pretty devastating. Like the babies couldn't function, and it was like really upsetting. They would never give up trying to elicit a response, but it just like, ooh, to me, that's so much worse than the mother leaving the room. Is the like,
yeah,
you've been replaced with a robot mother.
I'm not going to talk to you.
That's not a Harlow experiment. Some of
That's
his
not
were
a Harlow
far worse.
experiment.
So, yeah. So those kind of, like there were a lot of experiments being done at the time that seemed to be suggesting that the received wisdom, the understood science praised and promoted in the New York Times and the Atlantic and all the major places was, do not touch your children. Especially babies.
Especially babies. Yeah, let me read this quote that I found from him where he sort of defends his whole project, because his experiments were some of the experiments that actually started like animal rights activism. People hearing about this stuff and going, we can do something about this.
Yeah, indeed.
But he says, if you're going to work with love, you're going to have to work with all of its aspects. Some of the work is in a sense cruel, but remember, for every mistreated monkey, there exist a million mistreated children. If my work will point this out and save only 1 million human children, I can't get overly concerned about 10 monkeys. Besides, we successfully rehabilitated our depressed monkeys anyway. The techniques are probably applicable to human beings. That's jumping ahead a bit to his work on depression.
To another experiment. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that points to another practice that distinguished him from the other primatologists at the time, was that he kept his monkeys in a clean space. There was a notorious case where animal rights activists broke in and recorded the conditions inside a major primate lab at the time, and there was filth all over the cages, and there were roaches running through the cages, and that was defended by the scientists in the lab as providing additional protein for the monkeys. So he kept his monkeys very clean. They've in most cases received a lot of interaction and attention, and the standard practice was you do an experiment on a monkey and then you euthanize it. And he didn't kill his monkeys. He kept them all alive, and he said he felt an obligation. He definitely caused major ailments in his monkeys, psychological ailments, but he said he always felt an obligation at least to try to cure them, which was totally not practiced at the time or now.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah,
get to more of that later.
it's too easy to kind of read about this and go, oh my God, it's so shocking and terrible. But yeah, I mean, this stuff, not only does it inform psychological theory that we use, but yeah, it still goes on in a whole bunch of different forms today.
Yeah.
Do we want to skip to the last bit where he talks about the role of the father?
Yeah, he was also personally a very distant father. He was very hands off.
He had a distant mother himself. He was a distant father.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he goes through all these findings and he outlines this like really like watertight case for it's about touch, it's not about food.
Yeah.
And touch is the thing that matters. And then at the end, he says, it just comes out of nowhere. Let me see, where's a good place to start? The socioeconomic demands of the present and the threatened socioeconomic demands of the future have led the American woman to displace or threaten to displace the American man in science and industry. If this process continues...
Just a quick note, you think it's going somewhere else after he says that. You think that's a lead into something that is maybe going in a different direction. But yeah, go ahead.
That's right. If this process continues, the problem of proper child-rearing practices faces us with startling clarity. It is cheering, in view of this trend, to realize that the American male is physically endowed with all the really essential equipment to compete with the American female on equal terms in one essential activity, the rearing of infants. We now know that women in the working classes are not needed in the home because of their primary mammalian capabilities, and it is possible that in the foreseeable future, neonatal nursing will not be regarded as a necessity, but as a luxury, a form of conspicuous consumption limited perhaps to the upper classes. And then he just goes, but whatever course history may take, it is comforting to know that we are now in contact with the nature of love. So
and that's partly he's using love a lot to say, like, in part just because that was a term psychologists did not use at the time. So he makes a point of hammering home that like love is a relevant concept. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I understand that totally random paragraph to mean even if all the women go off and take a job, the men could stay at home and they would still have a function, and that would be to look after the babies. They have everything they need, which is like a body.
Yeah, but the ability to provide comfort, touch, holding, stimulation. So maybe
it's not so bad.
I was going to say, where's the lie?
Yeah,
like down to like breastfeeding as a luxury practice, right? Like that's something that's talked about a lot, at least in the States, that like it's formula is often used other than cases where there's a kind of a medical problem or need. Formula is primarily used by working class women. It's often, it is considered a luxury in the States for one of the parents to stay at home.
Yeah, no, now that I've revisited that, I think maybe he's addressing like an anxiety that was present at the time. He's trying to make it okay.
This is like, it's funny because he was, he did something he had a very strong, maybe even stronger than I'm used to, a very strong fuck you reflex. And he was criticized a lot by animal rights activists. And in response, and so some of the quotations that are like cited in prominent places were when he was confronted about being cruel to animals, he would then say things like, yeah, I don't give a fuck about animals. I don't care. I'm a scientist. And when he was when he was confronted by feminists, he would say equally obnoxious things about women. However, all of he had a lot of female proteges. He had his brilliant second wife worked in the lab with him, and was given and took free rein to pursue her own experiments, though she was not officially on the faculty at the university. And he was, all of the women who came out of his lab speak very highly of him. He was not, he was famously a very generous mentor. There are no rumors that I've seen anywhere. People say a lot of bad things about him. No rumors anywhere of any weird predatory stuff, any sex stuff. He was notorious for saying obnoxious things and putting obnoxious jokes into his talks and making a point of responding to hostile interviewers by becoming more hostile. But I kind of feel like he's the Like I would rather my daughters work in his lab than in a
Right.
lot of other places, you know?
Right.
Like I think he is he did a very good job of imitating someone who of imitating like an old school patriarchal misogynist. And I think he, practically speaking, was actually super progressive.
And it also just seems like he was a man on a mission.
Yeah.
He wanted to figure out what this thing was. I really like these quotes at the start where he sets up why he's doing this study. He says, the apparent repression of love by modern psychologists stands in sharp contrast with the attitude taken by many famous and normal people.
I love
And then
that line.
and then he's further on, he says, thoughtful men and probably all women have speculated on the nature of love. He's basically saying like everybody understands what love is instinctively, but no one studied it. And I have actually run these experiments and I've figured it out, where it comes from, how it works, and how you can break it, basically.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, in fact, it's very difficult to break. It's very difficult to, like, once the bond is formed, almost nothing will break it. And that was a lot of the experiments later on were sort of variations on how can we make it as unlikely as possible that this baby, this like grown macaque is still going to respond to even just the image of the former cloth mother surrogate. And that response seems to be pretty permanent.
That was the one that really killed me, actually, was
The love
where
machine.
they press well, that's also quite bad. The one I was thinking of is where they press a lever and a door swings open and they see something behind the window. Sometimes it's a mother, sometimes it's nothing, sometimes it's something scary. And
yes,
I was thinking about that, and I'm like, that's what I'm like with my phone. Just like press a button, like what's in there?
Yeah. Oh no,
something good, something bad.
That's as Joanna's fond of pointing out, that is the psychological stimulus that, setting aside any chemical factors, is the most fundamentally addictive. Intermittent positive reinforcement. Not every time, but sometimes you get
sometimes it's really good. Yeah.
And even the sometimes it's bad can make it more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
There was a separate experiment where they found that it was this was one of his students, Robert Butler, and he was, I mean, I think in a normal lab situation, all of the credit for Butler's work would have gone to Harlow, and he was the one who insisted on calling it the Butler box and making a point of. I mean, he was really quite generous as a mentor, but they found that if you put this monkey in a box, even if every single time the monkey opens the door, presses the lever and opens the door, it's nothing, the monkey will still never stop pressing the lever, because there's just fundamental curiosity. You're like, what about now? What about now?
Yeah, what about now? What about
which is sometimes also us with our phones. refresh.
Well, all right. I want to ask you about when he moves into depression studies, but
yes,
I also just want to know, as I'm sure listeners will also want to know, what is it that prompted you to start reading about this guy?
I heard of him. We didn't study him in school. I also, at least like Catholic school science program, they're great for math and literature and writing, not great for science. We definitely learned a lot of wrong science, not even creationist science, just idiosyncratically wrong science, from this nice daffy lady who taught us wrong things about the world. We were trying to recapitulate something I'd learned from her about the greenhouse effect to my freshman year biology teacher when I went to a real high school, and she just shook her head and looked confused. She didn't like I'd been living in Plato's cave. So we didn't study him in school, but my friend was in a band called Terry Cloth Mother, which is a pretty good name for a metal band. Yeah. And so that was when I first heard of him. And then I think I'm working on a long thing. I've been working on it for a while, but I'm working on a long thing that is about a mother. And yeah, I mean, I think my interest in the subject sort of came from the other direction, because an observation I have had about parenthood that is not remotely new to me, or new in my sharing it, is that there is something fundamentally different about parental love. That it really feels like it's not quite the right, with the exception of like, there is a certain, especially early on, like visceral physical urge to touch your own child or baby, that it did echo to me some of the like physical intensity of longing in puberty, like just the sort of like that agony, that some of that is wakes up some of, in a different sense, is, it's traces of the old flame, but really it's just a totally different thing. And it can totally coincide with like maddening rage and frustration, like a terrible behavior. Like it's not even like, there are times when I really don't like my daughters, but this other thing is just unchanged. Like there isn't, it is more constant than anything else I've ever experienced.
Right.
And so I started working on this thing largely out of an interest in my own experience of that, and even in my own fiction, I guess. Like the model for that kind of experience is motherhood, not fatherhood. He talks elsewhere even more about fatherhood, and in cases in cultures where there's a much clearer division of labor and much clearer gender expectations, there is such a thing as fatherhood. There's one of the old truisms in U.S. politics is that the Democratic Party is mother and the Republican Party is father. The Democratic Party is sort of nurturing and always reassuring and always present, and the Republican Party, it kind of lays down the law, but sort of provides a leadership and a figure you can respect from a distance. Not that I think there are many problems with that analogy, but there is at least like conventionally there are different, and I think like meaningfully different models to what fatherhood and what fatherhood is and what motherhood is. My own experience being a primary parent and just spending as much time with my daughters as I have and as I do, it is ferocious in a way that feels traditionally attributed to mothers. Like even talking to some of my male friends who have children, who will remark on the sort of the striking difference between what they seem to feel and what their wives seem to feel. No, it's very immediate and very intense and very physical for me. So I was very interested in that, and then I somehow stumbled back into his work and his claim. And the other, I think, interesting claim he makes, apart, so like when he talks about normal people caring about love, again, he's really, really frustrated that psychologists don't take love seriously.
He's just frustrated with them in general.
Yeah, he disparages psychologists. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I love this line where he's like, experimental psychologists with their peculiar propensity to discover facts that are not true brush this theory aside.
Yes. Yeah. No. I mean, and his, one of his refrains was that psychology is always catching up to common sense.
Yeah.
And that many of his experiments were driven by like what seems pretty obviously to be true to most people. And then is there some way we can test that? But then he says like there is one way in which he credits poets and novelists as doing more to examine love than psychologists have. But then one way in which he corrects poets and psychologists is he says that it would appear that this emotion has long had a vast interest and fascination for human beings, regardless of the attitude taken by psychologists. But the quotations cited, even by famous and normal people, have a mundane redundancy. These authors and authorities have stolen love from the child and infant and made it the exclusive property of the adolescent and adult. So that's true. Like when we talk about love stories, we are always talking about adolescent and adult stories, and that is primarily our interest in love, and even parental love is an adult experience. It's not mirrored by the child's love. It's a different thing. But he says like you're looking in the wrong place. before any of us was an adolescent or an adult, we were children. That's where love begins.
Yeah.
And I both like resisted that because it does seem to me that there is this fundamental thing about parental love, but I don't know. But I think he then makes a pretty strong case that like whatever this is that happens in early childhood, that state seems to stay with us, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
And that's the devastating thing about it. I can remember the first time a psychologist introduced the idea of attachment theory to me.
Mm.
And I had one of these galaxy brain moments where I was like, oh, that explains everything. And then my dear friend Jonathan, who studied psychology and did a PhD in psychology, and through that process came to despise the entire field and basically think that it was totally bunk, would often say to me on the phone, fuck attachment theory. Fuck it. It can't do anything for us. And at the time, I was really annoyed with him because I was like, well, this is the only thing that's helping me make sense of the world.
Yeah.
But over time, I've started to realize the thing about attachment theory is it's used, and there's this book that's handed around here in Australia by psychologists called Attached, which is just very straightforward attachment theory stuff. So it's still very present. But the thing about it is that you read about it and you go, all right, so like I'm an anxiously attached person. And
right.
Like it's just awareness. You can't do anything with it. And the best advice that a book like that will give you is try to act like a secure person.
Right. No,
like, well, I'm not fucking wired that way.
Yeah. No, like that's exactly like it would have been better if from a very early age you had grown up to be a securely attached person, because those people are better in all respects.
In all respects. And there's like little kind of lip service paid to like, as an anxious person. I mean, I'm talking about my own like quote unquote diagnosis. Like you're very caring, you're very thoughtful, you think of everything, and you know, you're very empathetic to other people and they're suffering, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's great. But life is hell. And I really wish that I could be more like a secure person. But yeah, it's I'm enjoying now seeing like in the kind of Instagram meme, TikTok-y kind of conversation around this stuff.
Is there one going on now much or?
Well, yeah, people talk about attachment theory a lot, like in those worlds. And one of the things that they seem to be coming around to is this thought that it's not a style thing so much. Like it's not like you can have different kinds of attachment to different people.
Yeah.
As you move through your life, you can be more anxious or avoidant or secure. It's not like a static, fixed state, but that seems to be kind of a new idea, and I'm not sure it's backed up by anything except like people's own thoughts about themselves.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my feeling about it is similar to yours, which is it did help me understand things a little better once I understood it about myself, because I don't know exactly what I am because I haven't spent that much time with it, but I know I'm not securely attached. I know I'm not the good one. I'm some, and I'm not negative. I'm not like, I don't know, what's avoidant attachment is the other one,
Yeah.
Which is not attachment, the opposite of attachment. I don't think I'm the worst one, but I think I'm one of the middling ones. It is. I don't think there's anything you can really do about it, and so in that way, it's sort of useless. It's sort of like, what blood type do you have? Ooh, too bad.
Yeah, shame.
But then it does help. It is helpful with like what's the notion my mom explained to me about. She's really into Jungian psychology, and the premise of it. I'm very skeptical of a lot of these things, but the premise of it is basically that it is helpful to construct a mythology that makes sense of your life, like a personal mythology of your own life.
Yes, I think that's true. As long as there's flexibility,
a sufficient summary, and there's no further need for yeah. So, but you actually know something about Jungian psychology?
No, only the tiniest bit. But I mean, that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Is which parts of the story I've been telling myself about me are actually still useful, because it is all a story.
Yeah. Yes.
even the stuff about like what it was like in my home in my early childhood, I'll never really know how much of that is true or what that was like day to day.
Right.
And so I can sit here and be like, well, my mother had these issues, and so she was unavailable in these ways, and that's why I'm fucked up. And it's just like, yeah, but I don't know, like maybe that's true. That's something that like my sister told me 5 years ago.
Right.
But she's talking about 40 years prior. Like, who knows?
Yeah.
So all I know is like how I feel today and what kind of stuff I can mash together to make it through the next 6 hours.
Yeah. Whatever version of a story I have about my own life, like my thought about it is like, this causes me constant suffering, but demolishing it if I demolished it, I would cease to exist. I wouldn't be able to function at all.
Right. And there are some things that are just indisputable, like this person died or that person was sick or whatever.
But like what means what and what causes what seem to be very much open to interpretation.
Yeah, it's kind of up for grabs. And I want to bring in the depression studies that he did too.
Yes.
So after he divorced his first wife, he married the woman that you mentioned, who he worked really well alongside. He'd always struggled with depression, but when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, he really went into a very dark place. And he was I was going to say he was institutionalized. I think he like voluntarily went into rehab at the Mayo Clinic.
He checked himself in. Yeah.
He checked himself in for 60 days. And in that time, just felt like a really, had a really, really difficult depression. He had ECT at one point. And his like motivation for getting through it was like, I want to tell people what this was like, and I want to find a cure, because nothing they're giving me here, the group therapy is bullshit. The ECT did something, but it didn't really fix it completely. I need to figure this out. So then he comes back to the lab and he does some even worse things to his monkeys.
Yeah.
This
is what is less well known than the terry cloth and wire mother experiments. When people hear about this, including me, they are almost universally horrified by this series of experiments. I do want to clarify, there is some conflation that takes place. So sometimes you'll hear people say things like, he had monkeys in total isolation, some for their entire lives, for years and years and years on end, for 15 years at a time. I saw one place. What is meant by that is that standard practice for primatologists at the time was to keep every monkey in a separate cage. That is, the monkeys could see each other, but not touch each other. That was what he considered significant isolation, not total, because you could see them and you had some interaction with, scientists and things. He designed a contraption that it had some alternating names, and all of his students were constantly pleading with him to change the names that he came up with for his horrible inventions. They really hated this one. He called it the Pit of Despair. It was a stainless steel chamber that was like a downward pointing triangle with smooth sides and a covered top. And there were drainage holes along the bottom. And the monkeys were kept in this chamber in the dark 24 hours a day. Now, these were normally socialized monkeys who were healthy when they were put in there. And it was basically an induced major depression. They were kept there for varying lengths of time. The longest who were kept in there were kept there for 2 years. And they were pretty fucked. I mean, they were all fucked, but like at least up to 6 months, it seems like they were able to do some things with them. They found that these monkeys stopped responding to nearly everything. Some stopped eating entirely. They could not be induced to reproduce, and so they were forcibly reproduced in some cases. He came up with also a horrible name for that contraption. Though again, lots of animals are forcibly inseminated in lots of labs all over the world, and so, and farms and whatever. But these monkeys were completely shut down. They would not respond to stimuli except by curling up and shuddering and sometimes rocking themselves. When introduced to other monkeys, they were immediately shunned by those monkeys, and seemed to recoil even further. When they tried to socialize them one-on-one, that didn't work either. And when they did have children of their own, so there were the wire mothers, the cloth mothers, the monster mothers, which is those ones that tormented their babies in between comforting them. And then this was the category he defined as the evil mothers. The evil mothers were the depressed monkeys who were then forcibly inseminated. And they would either completely ignore their babies or torture them to death.
I didn't read that bit.
The worst one is that one of them sat on her baby and chewed off all of its limbs. So yeah, actively evil mothers. He does say it's interesting in the Nature of Love essay. The Nature of Love essay does not touch on any of this stuff.
No, no.
Though there is, I've been searching for it. There is apparently a paper that was published in Psychology Today called "The Sad Ones" that he wrote that I really want to get my hands on, but it's not online. But I think it's worth noting he makes a claim in the Nature of Love essay that the cloth mothers are actually superior to the monkey mothers.
Yes.
And he says they never bite their children, they never hit them or snap at them, and they have a much lower infant mortality rate than real monkey mothers do.
Yeah, I think the phrase he uses is infinite patience.
Yes, infinite patience. They're always going to be there. They're never going to turn you away, and they're never going to not provide you with warmth, because they were also heated artificially, as were the wire mothers. That was a constant. Later experiments, separate from the depression ones, demonstrated that they were actually they ended up not being true. That it turned out, he mentions some possibilities in later research, and they did test mothers that moved or that could move, and those ended up being much, much better than the cloth. The cloth mother babies still ended up being pretty anxious because they had comfort but no interaction. And so they were other versions of the mothers later on that could move around, and those tended to be better. But yeah, he said we produced mothers more evil than anything nature could conceive. Those were the monkeys in whom they induced depression. The pit of despair experiments are the ones, I think, they are universally, even in like objective factual accounts of his life, they will be referred to as inarguably unethical.
Yeah. There's this quote from him coming out of the clinic where he says, depression has been recognized as a clinical syndrome for over 2,000 years, which is a long time to find out nothing about a disease entity. Essentially, nothing so far has been achieved and everything remains to be done. So again, like, he's on a mission and he's going to make some monkeys' lives incredibly miserable to get there. And the thing that I didn't fully understand was the way that he does end up rehabilitating some of these monkeys who've been 6 months or 12 months total isolation.
Yes.
What I was reading was that he introduces them to what he calls a therapist monkey, which is a younger monkey, I think, that has been raised with a cloth mother. And then somehow that relationship heals.
There's actually there's a beautiful symmetry to these experiments, in that one of the things they learned when they were doing the monster mother experiments is that a baby monkey will never give up on its mother. Once it's bonded, once it's attached, it will never stop going to her for comfort. And so the mother can keep batting it away, blasting it with cold air, shaking it and throwing it across the room. It'll keep going back for comfort. They said that behavior was at its peak around 3 months old. And so what they did is the monkeys that had been in the pit of despair, they put them, this was different than the monkeys who gave birth to their own infants. These were other baby monkeys brought in from elsewhere. They were brought in at the age of 3 months and put in the same cage as the monkeys in whom he induced despair. They treated them like monster mothers. The baby monkeys would go to them and touch them and cuddle them, and the older monkeys would resist them and move away and turn away from them, but they would never accept rejection. So they kept going back no matter what, and kept clinging and kept stroking. And then eventually, very consistently, the monkeys in whom he'd induced depression would turn and start touching and interacting with the baby monkey. And eventually they could be reintroduced into the group cage. There were lasting effects in cases of trauma. When they introduced like a loud noise or a scary stimulus, the monkeys, you could see in those cases which monkeys had depression induced in them, because they would curl up and start rocking. But in most of their lives, they were able to interact again as normal monkeys after this process of basically forcible cuddling with a baby.
Yeah, and it sort of points to a whole bunch of there's some conclusions you can draw from that, some of which are helpful and some of which I think lead you down a weird path. Because this interview I was listening to earlier this morning with this guy talking about trauma was talking about community and socialization as part of a cure.
Yeah.
Also pointing to things like drugs and talk therapy and all that sort of stuff that we use for everything. But I think you can hear about that and you could draw from it too. Oh, I could love a depressed person better. I just have to never give up on them. I have to just be around them. I have to just keep on loving them, and then eventually they will heal.
Yeah.
And that is not true.
Yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible advice, because it totally ignores all the damage you're going to do to yourself, among other things.
Well, yeah.
along the way.
Yeah, that is the key difference between us and the little baby monkeys.
No, I mean, to me, the moral of that experiment for humans is get a dog.
Right.
Like dogs are dumb, sloppy, 3-month-old baby macaques who will never stop trying to come hug you and kiss you and play with you, and will never stop wanting to give and receive affection. And, I mean, the other thing that it does exist as an actual need, it tends to be not at all associated with any treatment for depression or even avenues for treatment for depression. But I had my therapist bring it up. It's not possible where I live right now, but there are many hospitals that require voluntary newborn cuddlers.
Oh, right.
Because for whatever reason, they're either in some cases they're orphaned, or they have to be in the hospital all the time, and they just literally having somebody come in, be clean and wrapped in scrubs and whatever, and just hold and touch and interact with the baby for an hour or so will make that baby, I mean, apart from psychological health, that baby will be more likely to survive to the end of its treatment. Like the babies who don't like cuddling.
I'm going to look that up.
Oh, totally. I mean, I definitely have, it's not there aren't volunteering opportunities in where I live, but yeah, it's a thing that there is a need for.
Wow.
And I think probably could at least help with I mean, I will make a case not just for the cloth mother experiments, but for the pit of despair experiments.
Okay.
Here's my case. A paper I read just today. Sorry, I won't claim to have read it. It's very long. I skimmed it and I searched, searched it. But I read the abstract and I read over it and I looked at the results. This is an experiment done by a team of Chinese scientists and the Yunnan laboratory, I think. Big breakthrough in cancer research. Big breakthrough. The breakthrough was they found that they can, using a specific virus, a lentivirus, they can quickly and reliably induce pancreatic cancer in tree shrews. So because tree shrews are evolutionarily much closer to humans than lab mice are, the thought is that they will end up making much better subjects for cancer research in the future, because the results that are meaningful in tree shrews are going to be more likely to be meaningful in humans, and they have lower intelligence than like typical primates. And so the thought is they're a happy middle ground. Now, the experiment consisted of inducing pancreatic cancer in a room full of tree shrews not giving them painkiller and letting them all die of pancreatic cancer, which is famously often asymptomatic early on, also famously extravagantly painful at the end. And so they just murdered all of these tree shrews with cancer for really not even looking for a treatment, just to prove that they could give them cancer. And that was the major breakthrough. So you're probably seeing where I'm going with this. The number of people who died of pancreatic cancer in the US is the same as the number of people who committed suicide in the US in 2022. Right. It's the same number. And the difference being that the suicide number does not take into account all of the deaths of depression that are not acute suicide, that are things like long, slow substance abuse or other sort of deaths of despair, as they're called. And that, almost everybody who gets pancreatic cancer dies of it because of how it shows up. But like millions and millions and millions of people more are affected and debilitated by depression, even if they're not killed by it. So my argument is, like, if you think it's okay to like physically torture an animal to research a disease that kills 49,000 people a year in the US, then like either you consider depression a disease or you don't.
Yeah. But it is just so much easier for, like, nobody's going to say, oh, but we should stop pancreatic cancer research. Like,
no. It doesn't. Yeah. It's like the pushing the big fat guy off the bridge, and the story, the experiment Brian hates. The trolley problem. Like, it's much easier to flip the switch than it is to push the guy. And I think the pit of despair experiments feel closer to home. Again, in those, he kept those monkeys alive. I mean, I think some did die, starved to death, or died other way. But like, for the most part, he tried to keep them all alive and tried to cure all of them, and succeeded in many cases.
And continue to try. Yeah.
And that was also like the monkeys he did that to. That was a very small number of monkeys. That was like 10 to 20 monkeys. When people talk about the total isolation, they're conflating the thing about keeping monkeys in cages, which again, everybody did. And he was the one who said, oh, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this is actually bad practice.
Yeah, he started noticing the problems they were having. The pancreatic cancer comparison is really, really useful, I think, because the interesting thing for me coming to the end of reading about all this stuff was realizing that treatment for depression is not that different now than it was in the 1960s.
No.
We've got TMS. They didn't have that.
Yes.
We probably our like talk therapy is a bit different.
Yeah. Less Freud in the room.
Yeah, less Freud and more, I don't know.
But more self-help.
More self-help. Yeah, heaps more books about it. But
DBT is also like a significant therapeutic breakthrough but that's not so much. I mean, that is used for depression some, but it's designed for borderline, and that's like that was a significant talk therapy breakthrough.
Right, I don't think I even know about therapy.
That. Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
Different from cognitive behavioral therapy.
All right, okay, yeah. But yeah, I don't know a great deal about pancreatic cancer treatment as it stands right now, but my day job is working in like bureaucracy in a cancer research hospital. So sometimes I hear about like new breakthrough treatments, like you can immunize against this cancer, and you can do all these incredible things.
The HPV vaccine, which, like, holy God, please. I love my Christian listeners, but like, please, God, American evangelicals, don't not give your daughters the HPV vaccine.
Definitely do it. Yeah. Definitely do it. Yeah. Yeah. But then when you get to a point in life where you think, I don't know if I can do this anymore, I really need help, you go back to this drawing board that's like the same as it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. Where it's like, hey, do you want to talk to someone? Do you want to go on drugs? Do you want to do something extreme? Like you were saying in a previous episode, do you want to get involuntarily locked up for 72 hours so we can make sure you don't kill yourself? Like, it's pretty basic.
Yeah.
There are a lot of cancer treatments that are still the same as they were 50 years ago, for sure. Yeah. Like if you had bowel cancer in the 1950s, you'd be having the same operations that you're having now. Yeah. But then there's this other world of like futuristic, crazy shit that we do because cancer research is sexy. Because
yeah, I mean, and to be fair,
yeah.
cancer kills a whole lot more people than depression. Pancreatic cancer, but and cancer is many different diseases that all get called by the same name. But even, I mean, like bone cancer, which like research for bone cancer has got to be brutal because it is excruciatingly painful, and not just at the end. That killed 2,000 people last year in this country.
Yeah, and
1/25 of the number of people who died of depression.
Yeah. And things are definitely changing in terms of attitudes. Like we have over here, we have a thing called Movember.
Oh yeah.
Have you heard about this?
Matt Wall is into this. This is the mustache one.
Yeah. So maybe you have it there too.
I know some people are into it, but I don't totally understand what the deal is. Except people grow mustaches.
No, I'm getting mixed up now because that is actually a prostate cancer thing. I thought it was a depression thing.
That's like a male cancer thing, like balls and prostate.
So it's like, I'm going to grow a mustache in November. People are going to donate money to see me with my stupid mustache, and then that's all going to go to prostate cancer treatment. For some reason, for a minute there, I thought it was a male, like depression in men thing.
But we really outsmarted, I think, the women in that case, because think of all the women who forced themselves to go on like 10K runs to raise money for breast cancer. And men just said, well, what if I just grow weird facial hair? You can donate money for like, it's just we got way more out of way less work, I have to say.
Smart one. Yeah, smart move.
But
we've got I think we've got the Beyond Blue Institute. We've got the Black Dog Institute.
What are these? I don't know what these are.
These are just like community organizations in Australia that you can call if you have.
Oh, these are psychological things.
Yeah, and also they provide information. They've got helplines. I think some of them are involved in research, but they're definitely involved in like various kinds of support. We've got a thing called Lifeline, which is just 1-800 number that you just call if you're about to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
That's staffed by volunteers. So that sort of stuff is out there too. But it does feel when you or someone close to you gets to that point, not necessarily even the point of suicide, but just the point of like not really being able to function. The options are pretty limited, and I don't want to argue for the pit of despair, but I don't know what else I can argue for.
There was some writer who called it the Black Dog. That's got to be where the title comes from, that group.
Yes.
Who was it?
Now, I want to say that was Les Murray, but I think that's wrong. He definitely used that phrase.
Somebody either dead or very old said it, I think. Famous famous suicide hotline volunteer Ted Bundy might answer the.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Which is like, it is one of those things where you're like, well, we have to have like schools for children, but like there are, like certain, when you have like a certain small percentage of horrible people in the population, they're going to be attracted to different places. And like, so you're going to get some weirdos are going to show up for the suicide hotline volunteer line.
Absolutely.
But yeah, with luck, it does help people. Yeah, no, we don't, I think we don't totally. Yeah. I wonder how much that would change if there were a biological test.
Yeah. If you could say, oh, I just put some of my saliva on this little stick and turns out I'm depressed today. I mean, you have this over there as well, but we have the quiz. It's like,
oh, the PHQ-9, where the like
something like that.
Yeah. My family members think that I'm a disappointment to them is one of the questions here. Yeah.
Yeah. How often do you think that it is not worth continuing on?
Right. I take very little pleasure, even less pleasure, no pleasure,
anything at all.
Yeah.
The funny thing is when I do that one here, because we can get psychologist appointments rebated, but you have to have done that little test in the last 6 months. But when you do it, the GP will just be like, just put whatever you want. I'm going to give you these sessions anyway. Like if you say you need it. But I did it about maybe 9 months ago, and just answered it honestly. And then this new GP of mine was like, so you have like moderate to severe depression. And I was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Like,
There's
I knew it
a
was bad,
magic
but I didn't know it
number.
was that bad.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a magic
yeah.
number on ours that's the like, you might not be able to leave this room number. So you have to be
Yeah,
careful with
yeah.
that.
They
Yeah.
start to look worried, and you're just like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I feel the same now as I did 3 months ago. Like,
And the like, and they spoil the test a little bit because they have like a giant asterisk next to it with a special note that says like for doctor, but it's like for the last question, of course, is like I like how much am I thinking about killing myself? And
yeah,
basically anything more than nothing never is like a red
yeah,
flag and
yeah.
demands immediate intervention. And so you just learn like never check anything other than nothing never in that box
Yeah,
because
like
if
as
you
if people are
yeah
like not smart enough to anyway.
read the note that says like emergency intervention necessary if anything other than nothing never is checked in this row.
You will be handcuffed
Right.
and
Yeah.
frog marched out of this room. Yeah. I don't know. I do feel really lucky with the setup that we have here. I feel pretty I feel pretty taken care of. I was a little sick when I first got to New York and I had to go to a doctor, and that was a hell of an experience.
Oh yeah.
A very expensive
Oh
experience.
shit.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Because
yeah, just like,
you don't have relevant insurance here.
well, I thought I did, but I got back to Australia and they were like, "Yep, cool, $50." I'm like, "What?"
Oh,
It
50
cost me
bucks.
nearly $400.
Oh yeah. That's
Yeah,
I was gonna say yeah.
yeah,
That
yeah.
sounds right.
But
Yeah, it's
anyway,
pretty
not
awful
not
here.
to go down the whole healthcare comparing
Right.
healthcare things. It's
And
boring. But
and
yeah.
American health insurance companies love turning down claims for psychiatry or psychology. I mean, so, yeah,
Right.
psychology is a well, yeah. So what you will sometimes hear here over here is like they will quietly let you know that you need to score high enough for them to get reimbursed.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So that's not. I wouldn't say that's all the time, but I've definitely
Mm.
been given that like it needs to be severe for so yeah like they'll
Yeah. Just think about your worst day and then score it based on that.
yeah. And I mean that was what I
Mm.
was told with the TMS thing. It's basically like in order to qualify, it's like if this worked at all and you would ever like to have it again, there needs to be a significant difference between the beginning and the
Yeah.
end. And so they sort of tell you that
Wow.
at the beginning and at the end. Like the
Wow.
beginning needs to be
Okay.
as bad as possible and the end needs to be as good as possible in order for them to see that this was not a waste of time and money.
Good Lord. Okay. That's motivating.
But get a dog or a 3-month-old rhesus macaque.
Yeah. Or go to the neonatal clinic. Don't
Yeah,
worry about signing up to volunteer. Just march in there. I'm sure it'll be
yeah.
fine.
Just yeah, and presumptive entitlement. You'll yeah,
Yeah.
act as
Grab a
if
baby.
fake it till you make it. That's the parent of a very sick child. Yeah, I'm going to include this paper because there are some pretty heartbreaking photos in it of really cute little baby monkeys,
Yeah. Look forward to that.
and then some very confusing charts.
Yeah. Which I didn't really get, but I didn't think I had to.
No. I mean, yeah, they're it's. I mean, it is like they the findings were very much in contradicting received wisdom at the time, but the Harlow lab was very consistent with what they had experienced with the monkeys,
Mm.
which yeah, they basically had to build the lab from scratch, and in many cases were like bringing the monkeys home because they didn't have a lab, like they didn't have it set up at the time, so there was like a lot of human monkey interaction, and like the book I read called Love at Goon Park, which is a great name for a book. All of the blurbs say she's a marvelous writer. I think it's important to keep in mind she's a marvelous science writer. I know some science writers. There are some wonderful science writers. The standards are a little different. I found it to be not great writing, but a fascinating story. Though cruelly, Harry Harlow was an amateur poet who wrote poetry throughout his life, and he would give little poems to his students, and he would write jokey poems. Kind of cruelly, the author includes little snippets of his poems at the beginning of almost every chapter.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like like he didn't try to publish his poem. He was just writing like it would be like in like my the biography of my the biopic of my life as a like bad middle-aged chess player. If they like started every section with like clips of like the ballroom dancing class I took with Joanna before our wedding. I was like, why? Like, why are you like? Don't show this. He's not. He's not saying he's good at this. Don't make us read this. It's like it's so embarrassing. But he did love. He loved poetry. He had a lot of respect for poets.
Yeah, yeah. He's just a frustrated poet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very much so. And I think pretty. You know, he was the least diplomatic. He was. Yeah, he could not have been less diplomatic if he tried. And everybody is totally horrified by his experiments when they learn about them. I kind of stand by him almost entirely. Like, I don't think all his jokes are funny, though the wire wife joke was a good line. It's,
hilarious.
It's not
Let me find
nice. It's certainly not very fair, but yeah.
I'm never going to find it now, but yeah, he makes it.
Yeah. A charming lady once heard me describe these experiments, and when I subsequently talked to her, her face brightened with sudden insight. Now I know what's wrong with me, she said. I'm just a wire mother. Perhaps she was lucky. She might have been a wire wife. Which then I thought, like, I don't
Amazing.
know, is that yeah, I don't know. But yeah, like give me that kind of feminist. Give me the feminist who doesn't say any of the right words, but like helps women build good careers and learn things and be successful scientists. Again, like that's where I would send my daughters. Again, because he was not the bad kind. He was this kind of sexist who would make obnoxious comments, not the kind of he was not a predatory, sex touching looking, that kind of guy.
Yeah, look, honestly, if I got to choose between working with a guy who's gonna like I know if I walk too close to his chair at a certain time in the afternoon, he's going to pinch me on the ass, and a guy who's going to explain feminism to me, I will work with the ass pinching guy.
Yeah,
because I can just walk around his chair.
That's true. He was not an ass pinching guy. He was.
No, he wasn't.
He would just like make an He would like read an embarrassing poem at your wedding that like compared your marriage to like monkey research or something.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I kind of that's. I don't know. I think it's we are right to be horrified by it, but also it's like the Cyclops child story. Which have I talked to you about that?
I don't think so.
Oh, it was my horror class. It came up because one of the I've had two nurses take the horror class, both good writers. Yeah, it was one because there was a question of euthanasia that came up, but there's a story. It was not published as just a report in. I think it might also have been Psychology Today, but it was a very elderly doctor talking about something he did back in the 50s. He was writing about it like 50 years later, where a child was born with, I'm going to look up the name of it because it is something you do not want to Google. Yeah, Harlequin ichthyosis. It is an absolutely horrifying birth defect. And among other things, the child was, instead of eyes, it had a single blind bundle of exposed nerves in the middle of its face, and it was able to breathe, but it was not able to eat. And Harlequin ichthyosis also causes basically horrifying, untreatable, open lesions all over the skin, and there's no cure, and the baby would definitely eventually starve to death. But he said, what we did at the time was we told the mother that it was stillborn and I euthanized it. Right. Now, lying to the mother is one thing, but he wrote in the essay, we should definitely have laws against this, but also sometimes you should still do it.
Yes, I agree.
And I was totally horrified by that story, but in kind of the same way that I'm horrified by Harry Harlow's experiments. Like I think I kind of still defend the practice. even if, generally speaking, we're right to be horrified and we should continue to be horrified, he treated depression as a real disease in a way that I think we're reluctant to.
Still, yeah.
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 The Cyclops child. Truly horrific. In fact, like, as I told my horse, it was like, if this were fiction, it would be a brilliant work of horror fiction, but it's apparently just a memoir of a young doctor in the 50s.
Yeah, no wonder you've got nurses in your class. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. One was a neonatal nurse and one was a hospice nurse. Both interesting angles. Anything else on Harry Harlow, The Nature of Love, Monkey Affection?
Just got to go rock back and forth in a corner for a bit now.
Yeah. The rocking, which it's apparently related to the same impulse that makes us rock babies. That there is something fundamentally comforting, soothing about that, which I assume has to be related to evolving in trees, down to like the creaking of the rocking chair and the creaking of the tree.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's the theory of why we dream about falling.
All right.
We're literally dreaming we're falling out of the tree.
Falling out of a tree. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for subjecting yourself to this.
My pleasure. Look, anytime.
I will spare you his poetry, though. This is ostensibly a poetry podcast. His science rating is better. I also just love that he started this scientific paper with the sentence, "Love is a wondrous state, deep, tender, and rewarding."
Yeah, that's a great sentence.
Thank you all for listening. I hope you have a lovely Christmas, etc., with your families, or just on your own. If you're savoring the luxury of not traveling for Christmas, I envy you that much. Though I'm very glad to be here with the family. You can reach me, as always, at sleerickets@gmail.com, and go check out The Secret Show at sleericket.substack.com. With any luck, I will be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.